Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel again and to a new video. Today we are going to look at Garuda Linux a little bit more in detail. So I don't want to talk too much here on the intro, let's get going. So here we go guys, this is Garuda Linux. Before I get started, let me just say this is of course not a tutorial, so I'm not gonna edit too much this video. This is really my feeling about this distribution, which I've been using now for a while. Now, before I get started, let me just say, yesterday I had a small chat on Twitter with the guys from Garuda Linux, and I just wanted to clear up a few things that were asked on my previous video about Garuda Linux. Whether Garuda Linux is developed in India or Indonesia, it is actually developed in India. And it has actually also a German seed because one of the developers is actually German. Having said that, also Garuda is pronounced Garud instead of Garuda, as I did in my previous video, so I apologize for that. And so let's get started. So as you probably know already, Garuda Linux comes with many flavors. Garuda Linux is Arch based. It's an Arch Linux based distribution. And probably the biggest feature of this distribution is that it's offering out of the box the ButterFS file system with snapshots capability with timeshift. So of course, this is not the first distribution which has ButterFS and snapshot capabilities. Look, for example, at OpenSUSE, and we can actually install also, of course, Arch Linux with ButterFS and snapshots, or Manjaro as well, for that matter. But Garuda Linux actually is nice because you don't have to configure basically anything. You just install the distribution. Every flavor of Garuda Linux comes actually with ButterFS and snapshotting. This is one of the main features. And it's nice to have out of the box. The other big feature, of course, is that it uses the Linux Zen kernel. Now, we checked this already in the previous video. The Linux Zen kernel is a special kernel which is developed in order to be the most compatible with the most hardware. So it should theoretically work almost everywhere. Now, I have it installed now here on my laptop. This is a 2019 laptop. It's not so old, of course. It has 16 gigabytes of RAM and 512 gigabytes SSD. And this Cinnamon version of Garuda Linux is the one that I actually prefer. And I've tried all the flavors, but I came back here to Cinnamon because I find it's the most minimalistic one in terms of desktop environments. Of course, there are also window managers, but I wanted to try out now the desktop environments anyway. And I find the Cinnamon desktop environment is the one that I like the most. This is, of course, all based on personal preference. There is nothing like this is better than the other one. It's just, for me, I like better this than the other desktop environments for this distribution. Now, I've been using this for a while, and I have to say I am fairly impressed with Garuda Linux for the reason that it also improved with time. New updates have been released and it became better and better. Now, the ground of Garuda Linux for me, it's very important, which is the ButterFS with snapshots capability. Now, I demonstrated that already in the previous video, and I'm not going to do it in this video because I'm recording this straight on the laptop. But the feature works really flawlessly. I've been updating my system regularly and the snapshots have been created and worked absolutely fine. And with timeshift, you can of course manage also your snapshots. So let's have a look in here actually. I just made a few changes here on this installation because this is not actually coming by default. I went actually down and installed all the Garuda Linux wallpapers, and I changed also this icon here, which was not there when I installed the machine. I changed just the logo here. It's a little bit nicer, in my opinion. The thing is actually, before I get started there, to tell you about also the installation process. So the installation process is done via Calamares, and it's pretty straightforward. If you know Calamares, you know it's working flawlessly. The only thing I'd like to say about Calamares on this distribution is that probably it uses sometimes a little bit too much transparency. I've been having some issues about reading text sometimes on drop menus, where the transparency is so big that basically you don't see very well the text. So it's not a big thing, but just something to be aware of, but it will not disturb your installation anyway. Now, having said that, let's go here shortly into the menu and let's search for timeshift, which of course comes pre-installed in Garuda Linux. And we need to enter our sudo password. And this is timeshift. So I have already two snapshots here. These are because I actually upgraded my system this morning, and you can see these are auto snaps, so they are created automatically when your machine is upgraded. Of course, this is timeshift, so you can schedule your snapshot the way you want to. You can also schedule snapshots here with the schedule in timeshift as well. So this is of course a nice thing to have. I really like timeshift. It's very simple, it's very easy to use, and it's fairly straightforward also for the GUI, and it makes everything very, very easy to configure. So let me close this up. Now, I just changed a few things here actually in the installation. I didn't do much. I'm someone anyway who doesn't really install tons of packages. Let me pull up here the terminal, which, by the way, in Garuda Linux is the Z shell. I mean, this is the Cinnamon terminal, of course, but the shell itself is the Z shell. Let me go here full screen and increase the font size. We can check this by typing in which Z shell and hit enter, and you can see there is the user bin shell. And this is, by the way, if you're asking, this is the power level 10K theme, which you can of course also reconfigure if you don't like this structure. Now you can see the power level 10K here offers you icons and all stats here on the right side. By the way, when you install Garuda Linux, it's really nice because after the installation, there is a menu coming up asking you what you would like to do to finish up the setup. Basically, you can choose to upgrade the system, to edit the repositories, you can choose to debloat the system if that's what you want to do, and so many other options. Now, there is another menu that I'm going to show you afterwards, which can do basically the same things, but after the installation, it's basically a small script which will help you to set up your system the way you want to. Now, the Z shell is here. Now, let me type in here cat/etc/fstab. I just want to show you the fstab of Garuda Linux here. As you can see, this is a UEFI system, so it has a EFI partition, of course. It has all the Btrfs volumes here that you can see with the options available. And we have also a swap file. This is because I choose to do so during the installation. During the installation, you are given the choice to have no swap, a swap partition with hibernation, or a swap file. So you can see how the structure for the fstab file is and how sub-volumes are actually mounted in the distribution. Now, if I type in here lsblk, there is another thing that we can pay attention to, and that is the ZRAM. So the ZRAM basically it's something which will help the system improve performance. And I can definitely say Garuda Linux feels really snappy. If I type in here free-h, you can see the memory used is actually between 1.5 and 2 gigabytes. Right now, I'm using also OBS here, so it's using a little bit more memory. But normally, when it's on idle, it's going to use around 1.5 gigabytes of memory. So it's not the lightest system, but it's really fast. I haven't had any issue with performance on this system, really. So let me type in here top. And let's have a look here at the memory usage as well. Again, here we have 2.285 of gigabytes used. If I type in here the number 1, we can see also the load on the processors. And right now I am in idle, except that OBS is running in the background, but you can see the load itself is also not that high. So I'm actually very impressed with the performance of Garuda Linux. It's really fast, it's very snappy. I never had any issue, it never froze on me. I never had any issue with packages neither. And of course, this is an Arch-based distribution, so we can always type in sudo pacman-syu to update our system, and it's going to work fine. Now, there is another thing here that I would like to point out. Now, you can see here we have the 4 main repositories in Arch. We have the core, extra, community, and the multilib, which is also active in Garuda Linux. However, in Garuda Linux, there is a 5th repo, which is normally available when you install the system, and that's called the chaotic AUR. The chaotic AUR is an unofficial repository for Arch Linux, which contains several packages. It's in Brazil, and it has also several packages for Garuda itself. Now, I installed some packages from there, but the server itself is fairly slow, so I anyway disabled it as I didn't use it that much neither. And I'm going to show you after how you can do that. Anyway, I'll go ahead here and update my system. I see there is a package here to update, and you can see I have another snapshot coming up because I am updating the system. Again, then when you boot the machine again, on the grab bootloader, you always have the choice to boot in a different snapshot if you choose to do so. Now let me close the terminal. Another thing here that I installed, which didn't come pre-installed because I actually installed the light version of the Cinnamon desktop environment, is the Office suite. So I installed the LibreOffice, which didn't come installed here with the light version, but it's fairly simple. Of course, you just go to the terminal and you can install this yourself. Or if we type in here software, We can see we have here add remove software. This is going to open up PAMAC basically, where we can install software directly from here as well. So these are the software actually that I installed, except Telegram, which came already pre-installed, and Firefox as well. I installed VLC, LibreOffice, and OBS. And as you can see here, you can install also other packages like VirtualBox and many others. So it's nice to see in the previous video of Garuda Linux, I did actually, PAMAC wasn't working properly, but it has been updated since then and now it's working perfectly fine. Now let me close this up and go back to the menu here and type in here Garuda, and I'm gonna open here Garuda Welcome. This is the welcome screen that you see when you actually install the first time Garuda Linux. You can always, of course, choose to see this dialog at startup if you want to do so. And this is really cool. We have here a part which are the web services. So Bitwarden, as you probably already know, is an open source password manager. And we have all range here of free services that we can use. There is also Garuda Cloud. Garuda Cloud is basically Nextcloud for Garuda. So I actually registered here. They give you 256 megabytes for free, if I'm not mistaken. It's not that much, but it's still nice to have. And you have several other options here. You have also support options here in the middle and also a way on how to contact the developers. And if you want to do this, I definitely recommend you to do this via Twitter or Telegram. Especially they have a very good Telegram group where you can post questions if you have any. Now, if we go under tools, we have here Garuda settings. And if I open this up, it basically opens up here several options that we can use for the system, like for example the kernel. Now if I click here, you can see the system is using the Linux Zen kernel right now, and we don't have any other kernel installed. And this is basically the same interface that Manjaro is using as well to choose which kernel you want to boot. Now let's go back here to all settings. We have also settings for local settings, language packs, user accounts, time and date, keyboard settings, and hardware. So this is the place where you come to see which driver are in use if you have, for example, an NVIDIA card. So in my case, I don't have one here. I have an Intel card, and you can see that I have the Video Linux driver, which is open source and it's also installed. And I do also have the video mode setting driver. I also have a driver here for my Gigabit Ethernet controller. Now let's close this up and we will go back here to the welcome screen. We have also options here for the boot. So if I click this, I need to enter my sudo password. And here we can basically configure grub, our bootloader. So which picture you want to see, what is the timeout, and so on. And here you can also edit your kernel parameters if you wish to do so. Now let's close this up. We have here also a network assistant if you need it. We have also the partition manager to check your partition. We have time shift as we seen before. We have also system cleaner, which comes already pre-installed. This is BleachBit. And if you know already BleachBit, this is very familiar. You can go in here and choose what you want to clean up in the system. Now, let me close this up. And we have also here our software center. Now under maintenance, we can upgrade the system, reinstall packages, refresh the mirrors, or edit the repositories. Now, refreshing mirrors is something that I recommend you to do when you install it the first time. If you click here, it's going to basically run Reflector, and it's going to detect normally your country, and you can choose here which kind of mirrors you want to include. So for example, right now, I have only HTTPS mirrors, and maximum hours from the latest mirror sync are 2. I'm going to bump this to 6. And number of mirrors 10, that's fine. So I'm just going to click OK. And it's going to run and it's going to tell you, I'm going to save this in the mirror list. That's fine. I say, yes, it's fine. Then we need to put our sudo password and that's done. Now, this is actually where you can edit your repositories. So if you come here and you need to enter again your administrator password, you have this file, which is the configuration file for Pacman. So we need to scroll down here, and here you will see all the repositories available. So we have core, extra, community, and multilib. These are enabled. And by default, also the last one is enabled, which is this one, chaotic AUR, and the last line here. Now, I put an hashtag here on the front because I wanted to disable this. But if you want to enable this, you can basically delete this hashtag and the one on the last line and rerun the configuration file for Pacman, and you will have your chaotic AUR back as well. Now let me quit from here. And you have also options here to clear the cache, which is a very good thing because the cache tend to be also bloated sometimes when you don't clean it up often. And the same thing goes also for the package cache. So it's nice to have these options here. We have also an option here to remove orphans. If we click here, we need to enter our sudo password again. And you can see I have one. So let's go ahead and remove this by accepting the default. And there you go. And I can also remove a database lock if it happens to have one. Now we have also some options here for the Btrfs file system. Now FSStream here is already enabled, as well as the scrub option. And we have some other things that we can check here. Then we have some quick access commands here that we have available, and the control, and also some other settings. So here, for example, you can enable or disable Samba support and other things as well if you wish to do so. Now let's close this up. Now let me open up here a few programs. Let's go to Office and let's go to LibreWriter here. And let's open up something else. Let's open up, for example, under Sound and Video VLC Media Player. And let's open up something else as well. Let's go under Internet and let's go to Thunderbird, which is, by the way, the default mail client here in Garuda Linux. So we can click this. You probably already Thunderbird. This is fairly popular email client. So as you can see, I didn't set it up yet here because I actually refreshed the installation this morning. So I'm not going to do this now, but this is basically the setup that I'm normally working on the laptop. So I normally have VLC, LibreOffice, OBS sometimes, and the mail client open, as well as Firefox, and of course the terminal. And I'm switching over several tasks at a time. And in my time with Garuda Linux until now, I really didn't have any issue with slowdowns. So I'm not, of course, a power user here on the laptop itself. I do most of the hard work on my main machine, which is anyway Arch Linux. But for the things that I do here on this laptop, actually Garuda Linux is one of the distributions that performed the best. Now, this is normally how I work on the laptop. I have a few apps open and I switch over fairly frequently to these apps. And this is not, of course, the machine where I edit videos. This I'm doing it on my main machine. The laptop is for me really the machine that I use for office work most of the time. But I did actually edit one video here in Garuda Linux with Kdenlive, and it worked absolutely fine. The only thing is this is a Tuxedo laptop and it's a wonderful laptop, but the fans are quite loud, so to say. So no matter which distribution you install here, you're going to hear the fans one way or another. And Garuda Linux on this laptop is no exception. But this has nothing to do with the distribution itself, it's really the laptop. Now, I have to say also, after you install Garuda Linux, you have the choice to enable Snap and Flatpak support. So if that is something you are interested to have, you have that option to enable that after the installation. Now, I didn't do it here. I installed all the programs in binary basically, but you have the option to do that. And I think it's a really great thing that they offer you this. It's not that I love Flatpaks or snaps, but I love the fact to have the choice whether to have snaps or Flatpaks. I don't want to be forced to use one or not to use one. I want to be able to use it if I want to or not to use it if I don't want to. So I think it's very nice from Garuda Linux to offer you this possibility. It's all about choice. It's all about what you want or what you don't want, but it's up to you to decide what you want to use. Now, having said that, this version of Cinnamon, it's very simple and it's very light as well. Let's go here into the settings and let's have a look at it. Now I'll go full screen so that you can see better. You can see this is the standard Cinnamon desktop environment. The theme, it's, I believe, the Flat Remix. If I'm not mistaken, there you go. That's the Flat Remix GTK Blue. And that's fairly standard. You can download, of course, more themes if you want to here from the Add Remove button. You can download or remove some others if you already installed previous themes as well. Now, here, what's interesting is also the administration tab. Now, we don't have a lot of tools, but we have enough, in my opinion. We have the firewall. Now, the firewall in Garuda Linux is Firewall D, for which I have a video coming up actually next week. Now, Firewall D is a really easy firewall to use, and you can manage it directly from here. This is the firewall-config GUI utility, which is basically the graphical user interface for Firewall D. And we have also the icon here. But you can, of course, use also the terminal. If you go into the terminal, you can always type in here sudo firewall-cmd -list-service to see what services are in the firewall right now. I need to enter my sudo password here. And you can see right now we have the DHCPv6 client, MDNS, Samba client, and SSH available. This is because I chose actually the home zone in my firewall. By default, when you install Firewall D, and the same was also here in Garuda Linux, the default zone is the public zone. So like I said, there is a video coming up next week about Firewall D where I go really in detail about this stuff. So you will see in that video what Firewall D is all about. Now let's close this up. We have also here the login window, which is basically the display manager. Let me enter here the password. And here you can see basically we can change every setting of the display manager. So we have the background wallpaper, the background color, and so on. So if you have also some other things installed here, you can also select them here. And we can choose also how you want to actually see users. And if you want to also allow manual login or automatic login as well. And we have some other settings here for IDPI support and for monitors and what you want to show on the display manager. So it's a nice, cool little window to have. We have also the users group. Now, this is fairly simple, but it has a very nice option actually. Let me open this up and I need to authenticate again. And let me click here on my username. Now you can see here account type is administrator, of course, and then here I have the groups to who I belong to. So I belong basically to the audio input, LP, and so on groups, and I belong also to the wheel group, which is giving me sudo privileges. Now the nice thing is if you click here, you can choose which other groups you want to actually belong to, which is very cool. You install something like KVM, so you will have the libvirt group, and if you don't want to type in the password for sudo privileges every time you use KVM, then you can check yourself in libvirt here, and you will not have to type the password again for starting KVM. So it's nicely presented, and it's really handy to have it here in the user interface. Now let's close this up. Of course, we have also here the screensaver that we can change. And here we have, for example, how long after the screensaver kicks in, and we can customize also the photo and what we want to show on the screensaver as well. We have also here some option for tiling windows. So if I click here on window tiling, we can choose here to enable or disable window tiling and snapping. So let me show you what it means. If I minimize this window here, basically I go to the corners and you can see it snaps in position, whether it's on the right, the left, above, or under. So it's a nice thing. It's of course not a window manager, but it's a nice feature to have. And for example, if I normally work, let's say, let me close this window shortly, and I open up here LibreOffice, I could work, for example, with LibreOffice here. And let's say I'm going to put Firefox for my research here on the side. I can work like this when I research for the videos for the channel. This is something I do very often actually before doing the videos. Now let me close actually these up. And I'll go back again to the settings and I'll go full screen again. And we have many other options here for starter applications. These are the typical Cinnamon options. So all in all, I feel actually the Garuda Linux Cinnamon desktop environment version is really, really user-friendly. And for me on this laptop, it's really perfect. I really enjoy working with this distribution and with this desktop environment on my laptop. Now, probably I'm not going to choose this particular desktop environment on my main machine, but on the laptop itself, it just works fine for me. Again, this is all based on personal preference, like everything else in Linux. There is nothing right or wrong. There is just what is right and wrong for you. So for me, the desktop environment here, it's fitting well on this laptop for this Linux distribution. And the fact that it's Arch-based and it has a Btrfs file system with snapshots already integrated, it's a really big plus for me. Now, this is my feeling about Garuda Linux, and this is again the Cinnamon desktop environment. I also want to tell you that there are two versions of Garuda Linux that I also encourage you to try out. Those are the bare bones versions. Let me actually show you shortly. If we go on the Garuda website, let me go full screen here, and let me type in here Garuda Linux, and I'll go to the home page here. And let's go to download. And I'll scroll down here at the end of the page. Actually, let me drag this, is much faster. There you go. So we have the bare bones editions. Now, it's offered with the GNOME edition and the KDE edition. Now, these are really cool editions for me. Okay, this is for advanced users only, and it says here, this is a minimal installation and it's made for users who do not want extra software and functionalities and complain about bloat. So I actually tried this. I downloaded the bare bones GNOME edition And I shared a screenshot with you guys yesterday in the community on YouTube. And this is an edition that is really cool. It comes with very few packages and it doesn't even come with a network manager. So if you download and boot this machine up, you will not have an internet connection. Now what I did is go into the Arch Linux website and download the packages I needed for the network manager, install them manually, and I could then, modify the installation the way I wanted to, but it was a very, very, very bare bone installation. So you need to be aware here, as it says here also on the website, you are on your own. We don't provide any support for the minimal edition. So that means you have to really know what you're doing when you are downloading and using this bare bones stuff. Now, I had fun to it because I like to, tweak with these machines anyway. But you need to be aware, you need to install a lot of things if you want a fully functional machine with the bare bones edition. Anyway, while we are at here, we can see we have the various editions of Garuda Linux. We have Recbox, we have Linux Ukui, we have also Deepin, we have here i3. i3 was very nice. I tried this out for a while. Also, it was really nicely composed. We have also BSPWM, which worked also really nicely. And we have, of course, Wayfire, we have LXQT. If you have a laptop or a computer with less resources, this is definitely the way to go. We have also XFCE, and of course, Mate. We have Cinnamon, the one I'm using right now. We have GNOME, and of course, we have also KDE Plasma. So these are the editions that Garuda Linux comes in. Now, this is all I have to say about this distribution for now. I really like it, and I'm really, really looking forward to use it more in the future and to see also how this distribution is developing. Again, I definitely encourage you to try it out and to give feedbacks to the developers, because with your help, they will be able to have better updates. Now, this is all from my side. If you tried Garuda out, let me know in the comments below how it's working for you. I wish you a great day, guys, and I'll see you very soon in the next video.